Hi, welcome to Module 2, High Quality Curriculum. So last week we talked a little bit about what's the difference between curriculum and instruction, curriculum management and instruction, and you looked at the types of curriculum, you started reading the documents from Texas, and you unpacked a standard so that you would understand when you walk in a classroom what should be happening in that classroom, what the students should be learning, and what they should be able to do. This week, we're going to talk about what constitutes a high quality curriculum. So your objectives for this week are to analyze the state of your school's curriculum, articulate the role of the school leader in establishing a guaranteed and viable curriculum, present findings regarding curriculum interventions, and connect how state standards such as TEKS ensure every student has opportunity for a rigorous curriculum. In Module 1, I mentioned that you read that a Texas Effective Schools framework. And the goal of that framework is to ensure that there's a clear vision for what districts and schools across the state of Texas need to do to ensure an excellent education for all Texas students. If you're an out-of-state student, this document still has some really good core values that talk about effective schools framework, so you could use it in your schools as well. At the core of effective schools is effective instruction, interactions between students, teachers, and the content that determine what the learning outcomes should be. That instruction is strengthened and supported when you have an effective, well-supported teachers, where you have high quality curriculum and a positive school culture. Strong leadership and careful planning encompass and ensure those levers from the Texas Effective Schools framework. Lever 4 of the TESF talks about high quality curriculum, and what it ensures is that students have access to a TEKS aligned, guaranteed, and viable curriculum, assessments, and resources to engage in learning at appropriate level of rigor. So this week we're going to be looking at what is discovering and discussing high quality curriculum. So your assignment this week is going to focus on that. Let's take a look at the rubric. I always like to look at the exceeds criteria because that's where I expect you all to be. So for part 1, you're going to be identifying a guaranteed viable curriculum in your own school. So you're going to articulate the state of curriculum in your current school by providing concise responses with evidence that support your responses. And you're going to reflect on how this information can inform you when you get to be a new school leader in the school where you'll be. The second part is about curriculum interventions. We all know that it's the responsibility of the school to ensure that all students have access. And so sometimes that involves having curriculum interventions. And so in this part 2, you're going to be looking at curriculum interventions. So you're going to address the questions regarding the intervention with expert knowledge. You're going to become the expert in that area. And then you're going to articulate the importance, again, of this intervention in your role as a school leader. Why is it important for you to know about these things and to be very familiar and almost be an expert in your own right about what kind of interventions are happening in your schools to ensure that it is guaranteed and viable. And then you're going to create a presentation from what you've learned and upload that presentation to Blackboard. I would recommend that you either copy and paste your slides or make a PDF and copy and paste it, because you're going to be posting it in your Module 3 discussion board so that everyone can see what's going on. And then, of course, your APA. Make sure you always cite. We don't want there to be any problems with APA and plagiarism. All right, so Module 2. Part 1 is what is guaranteed and viable. So when you talk about a guaranteed curriculum, if you'll look at your week 2, Module 2 lecture, you'll see that we talked a little bit about this. So guaranteed just says that every student has access to an effective teacher whose responsibility is it to make sure there's effective teachers in the classroom, and access to the same content, knowledge, and skills so that everyone has a level playing field so that they have success in the schools. So you want to make sure that when you say it's guaranteed and you're looking at this week's assignment, you want to say, how do I know there's effective teachers? That may be a little push for you to know without seeing their t-test evaluations, but you can find some evidence, and that every teacher is teaching the same content. I've been in schools before where you may have fourth grade teachers and they may be teaching something different in every class. So you want to make sure that that's not the case. Viable means that you have given the teachers the time they need to teach and the students the time they need to learn. That's your scope and sequence. When are we going to teach this? You need to make sure everyone is on the same scope and sequence. And then establishing and maintaining that guaranteed and viable curriculum is a collegial process. You need to have established protocols and routines to make sure that the agreements are alive and that they're meaningful to everyone. So it requires you to be a leader in learning activities, dialogues about these, performance criteria, student progress. That's all in that PLC environment. That's all in that environment where there's risk-taking allowed, where people feel safe to do things, that when they disagree with you, like I talked in the web conference last week about they don't fear retaliation when they don't agree with you. And so what we want to do is talk about, does your school have a guaranteed and a viable curriculum? Do you even know what your scope and sequence is? And you're going to answer some questions and provide some evidence. You can go out and use any books, journal articles, any of those kinds of things, but you need to make sure that you're citing those. So question number one is, what year are you preparing your students for? I get so tired of hearing we're preparing our students for the 21st century. Folks, we're about to be in 2020. So we don't need to be getting them ready for the 21st century. They should have already been ready. But if you take a look at some of our curriculum and some of the things that we're doing, you're still teaching things that were being taught when I was in high school. And I won't tell you if it's 1973 or 1995. You'll just have to guess. We need to be preparing these students for 2020. And not even that, are we preparing them for when they leave school? And there's the Texas College and Career Readiness Standards in your Module 2 readings that you need to use as you start finding evidence about what year you're preparing your students to be successful in. The second question is, does our school have an agreement and common understandings of the essential content that all students need to know, understand, and be able to do? Well, that's going to be an easy question. Everyone's going to say, of course, it's our TEKS, or it's our New York Engage, or it's our whatever standards that you're using. But where's the evidence that everyone is doing that? Are you using lesson plans where they have to identify the standards they're using? Are you doing some kind of, how are you knowing that they're using the standards? And then you're going to describe that type of agreement. Now, if you're in a school that is not using anything, you need to talk about why. And then you're going to talk about what you would, what your agreements would look like when you become a school leader. How are performance criteria established and communicated to all stakeholders? How are you determining where's the evidence that these kiddos are mastering the standard? And how are you communicating that to everyone? How are you communicating it to parents, to the community, to the kids, especially to other teachers? How is that happening, and where's your evidence? How are you monitoring implementation? If I tell a teacher, here are the standards that you're going to be using, here's the scope and sequence, how does your school monitor that? Describe that, provide evidence. What about structures in place that are providing ongoing support? This is really critical because there has to be implementation with fidelity. And when we start looking at part 2, when we're talking about interventions, fidelity is a really big issue. Are you implementing it the way that it's supposed to be? If you've said this is our scope and sequence, how are you providing support to teachers to make sure they know how to follow a scope and sequence? And how does the development and implementation of state standards support the development of a QVC? So if you say, hey, we've got standards, we use that, but how do we know that that guarantees a guaranteed and viable curriculum? All right, Module 2, Assignment 2. So in order to provide quality education for all, and I mean all, and to ensure the success of all, it's imperative that we start with evidence-based curriculum. So from there, we find that the outcome is powerful classroom instruction. It's essential that instructional resources, teaching practice, and interventions all have an evidence base so that we can see their effectiveness with whatever that intended population is. Now, we can't expect a teacher to be effective if they teach the same way for all students. And we all know about differentiated instruction, but what does that really look like? And we should be providing a rigorous education designed to meet specific needs of all students. The standards are the floor. Everyone should be able to master those, but some students may need a little bit of help, and it may need to be differentiated. So the instruction has to be based on the curriculum. And that includes scope and sequence, student expectations, assessment, and explicit instructional strategies. So that's where your instructional strategies come in. It's part of the curriculum. It's not aside from, it's part of. So there are numerous interventions I'm sure that you are all familiar with that can be implemented to meet the needs of students. And you have to know about the fidelity of that intervention, how the intervention is assessed to ensure student success. What kind of professional learning opportunities are you going to provide to teachers to make sure that the intervention is implemented properly and that it's assessed properly? So in part 2 of this module, you're going to be choosing an intervention and becoming an expert. You're going to create a presentation, and then you're going to be uploading that so that all your colleagues have the same knowledge. Here's what I'm going to recommend that you do. If you are an RTI interventionist in your school, please don't choose RTI. This is a learning process for you. There's so much you're going to have to know and do. And go through this process because it may be something that might help you on the PASL. If you're, if you already know about, if you're a reading interventionist, don't choose reading. So you're going to choose one of these interventions. I've given you 9 of them that we have talked about that we think are important. Literacy or numeracy, reading and writing across the curriculum, academic vocabulary, response to intervention, special programs. So if you choose special programs with GTELL 504, you may have to do a couple of them together to get a good presentation. Co-teaching. What about AP honors and dual credit courses? How does that impact GT and those kinds of things? Differentiated instruction. And I don't want to know just about the teacher's going to put this little group in a small group and she's going to teach differently to them. Co-teaching, I think I skipped that one, and digital literacy. So here are 9 that you're going to take a look at. You're going to use these questions that I've developed for you to guide your description. So number 1, what are the research validated characteristics of this program? You're going to go look and see, is there research out there? And you're going to talk about what are the characteristics, and remember to cite your sources. What are the steps or the processes for this intervention or this program to be implemented? And how are you going to ensure fidelity of the implementation? How does this implementation promote growth in those students that you are have chosen to be in this actual intervention or this program? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? How are you determining which students should be exposed? How do you monitor the progress? How do you evaluate? I've had so many times I've been in a school where they'll say, we're just not going to use reading program ABC anymore because we don't like it. Well, has it been effective? Well, we don't really know. Or we want to pay $10,000 again for it because we love it. Well, great. Where's your evidence that it's been effective? Well, we don't know. So how are you evaluating the program? And how does the intervention provide authentic real-world opportunities to students? It's not just paper and pencil. I want to know how it's impacting real-world opportunities. And how does it ensure that there's a rigorous, equitable curriculum for all students? So those 9 questions are what you'll use to answer and talk about your actual intervention. And then you're going to create a PowerPoint presentation and just paste your slides in here. And a minimum of 9 slides so that you have a slide to address every one of these 9 questions. But if you need more, that's okay. But 9 slides. So I hope that you'll enjoy this assignment this week to really dig into your school to see, do we really have a rigorous curriculum and a viable curriculum? Or are we just saying that? And where's our evidence so that when you become a school leader, you can start looking at that? And then what to ensure that everyone has access to this GVC. How are we using curriculum interventions? And then being able to become the expert and share this with your colleagues. So enjoy this week, and we'll see you at the web conference.